We're very excited and grateful to have an amazing Sufi teacher and healer, Dr. Ibrahim Jaffe, with us today. Dr. Jaffe is the founder and President Emeritus of the University of Spiritual Healing and Sufism in California. He's the Murshid Murabbi Ruhi in the Shadhiliyya Sufi Order, meaning that he is responsible for guiding and helping thousands of Sufi beloveds the world over. He's known as an extraordinary teacher and particularly gifted healer, and thousands of people all over the globe have studied with him or come to him for help. We are indeed fortunate that Ibrahim has been able to take some time from his busy schedule to be with us today. His teaching today is Teachings from a Sufi Guide, Sidi Alawi. Ibrahim, welcome, and thank you for being with us today.
Hey, thanks, Pat, Abdullah, and welcome, everyone. I'm very happy to be with all of you, and I just actually got in yesterday from Jerusalem, so I'm a little bit jet lagging, and also had a little trouble with my sight on the flight, so I'm having just a little bit of trouble seeing today, so I may be kind of squinting and then trying to catch some of the writings that we're going to be talking about. But other than that, I'm delighted to be with you, and Abdullah, thank you for inviting me on your show, and and thanks to all the people that are present and are listening. So let's start with the Fatiha, everybody. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdina siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladina an'amta alayhim. Ghayril maghdubi alayhim. Wala dallin. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. Muhammadan Rasulullah. Ibrahim Rasulullah. Musa Rasulullah. Isa Rasulullah. Alayhi salatullah. Amen. Okay, everyone. So today we're going to be talking about one of the great Sufi masters of the 20th century. His name was Ahmed al-Alawi, and this is one of the few books in English I have here, as you can see, which has been published about him by Martin Lings. Many people consider him to be the preeminent sort of 20th century Sufi. And by the way, he was Sidi's sheikh as well. So Sidi's lineage comes through him. And Sidi was very interesting for the new people because there were basically two branches of Sufism that came, in the 20th century. One of them was Alawi, and the other one was, I think it was Darqawi. I'm not sure. There's a second name there. And those two came down, and the person who they actually both merged in was Sidi. So Sidi actually carried both lines of Shadhiliyya Sufism of the 20th century, and they came together in his heart. But in many of his teachings, really, I think this man, Alawi, was sort of the inspiration for a lot of Sidi's teachings. And so I thought it might be nice for us to kind of go back and look a little bit at the source of where some of these teachings came from that you're learning. Now, for the new people, I know there are many new people on the call today, Sufism is essentially the mysticism of God realization. How do you reach to the oneness with God, right? And Sufism is the path of purification. So you're purifying yourself to reach it. Now, the beauty of Alawi was that he, probably more than anyone I have personally met in the last, looked at pictures of or read about in the last 200 years, carried, I think, the most love. So this was probably one of the most kind, loving, caring Sufi masters that I think has come around in the last couple hundred years. So I really appreciate that about him. And I think that Sidi, I think a lot of Sidi's teachings at some levels were founded on this man. And then, of course, Sidi went on to study Ibn Arabi and Abdul Qadir Jilani. And then, of course, he took from his own sheikh, Tilmasani. And so there were many different forces that came together in him that brought through his particular brand of Shadhiliyya Sufism. So, as we learn the Sufism, I want to kind of give you some background on Sufism, which I think might be helpful for you, which is that there are many tariqas out there, a Rafai, Qadiri, many, many different ones that exist, Shali, and so forth. And these all come from a particular master. So there are particular masters that brought through these tariqas or orders. And of course, in the world today, the Shadhiliyya Sufism is the greatest or the largest order worldwide. It has the most adherents, and most of those are in Northern Africa, the Middle East, up into Turkey, areas like that. So the Sufi order itself comes from those areas. And most of these tariqas were founded by what are called kutubs, or the poles. And these poles carried the station of Insan al-Kamal. And there were always what they called one pole and 4 pegs. So in other words, there were always 5 of these people, always on the planet at any time, according to Sidi and Ibn Arabi. And these 5 people carry the spiritual access for the entire planet. And some say more than that, but it's much larger than that as well. So that these founders of these tariqas were people who were considered to be these poles and carried the light at that time. Now, this man, Ahmed Alawi, was considered to be a pole of his time. So he's also a very, very holy one and carried these very deep teachings. Now, he struggled very difficultly with a lot of criticism from the traditional Muslim orders of the world at that time, because there was a great deal of anger towards Sufism and about the Sufi practices and what Sufism was trying to bring forth. So as you read, and I read about it today, you're going to hear some of what he's doing is actually defending the Sufi practices and the Sufi understandings and why Sufis do what they do. Now, when I went through this book, how I always do it is I pray very deeply, and I ask Allah to show me what He wants me to read to you. And it was interesting, the stuff He had me read, in some levels, is very, very much about principles, the principles of Sufism, the basic practices of Sufism itself. Then he had the third part was about actually a very interesting couple pages where when the current pole died and Alawi stepped in to be the replacement of that pole, and he talks about that process of replacement. That was the third piece that came up, which I also found very fascinating. And I want to read to you some of that process of what occurred, because Sidi died, and inshallah somebody else will step in. And then finally, the fourth piece had to do a little bit with the station of testifying to God's unity. which I'll also be talking about briefly. So these are the 4 pieces that we're going to be going through today. And of course, we'll be looking a little bit at some Q&A at the end if there's time, inshallah. So, towards the end, if you have questions about this, you can raise your hand and we'll go through that. So I'm very delighted to have you all on the call. And I love your Minneapolis community. I really think it's a great community up there. And I'm very happy with the sincerity and the honesty and the commitment that I feel from many, many of you. I know you're really trying very, very hard in your walking. So as you know, we just completed Ramadan. Ramadan is the month of fasting. And it's also the month of Laylatul Qadr. And Laylatul Qadr is called the Night of Power, which occurred about 3 nights ago. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, was it 3 nights ago? I guess Eid's been the last 3 nights, so it's more like 6 nights now. And Laylatul Qadr is when the descent of the orders for this coming year are given. Okay, so this is the time now for all of you on the call that if you've been wondering what you're supposed to be doing in the next year coming up, you now have the answers. In other words, it's written, it's there. All you got to do is kind of peek behind the curtain, look, open it up a little bit, and it's all going to start coming in now. So everything should start unfolding for you very, very shortly as these orders come in. Now, as many of you know, if you read the teachings and you read the Quran, you'll see that it's said that every year you get 2 major trials and 2 major good things. Okay, so there's 2 big things that are positive and 2 strong things that you have to face. So every year we get 2 and 2. Okay, so one of the things in some levels what we're doing is preparing for those trials and getting ready for those blessings. And at the other level, we're looking at, what needs to be wrapped up, how do we move forward, and where do we need to go to in order to, kind of step forward into things. I think we're getting a lot of background noise, so you might have somebody unmuted on there that you haven't muted. I don't know, but I'm hearing a lot of background. It's not from me, it's coming in from someplace else.
Yeah, I'll work on it.
Yeah. Okay. So anyways, that's essentially, I want to just give you a brief story about my Laylatul Qadr because I think you'd find it interesting. I got invited by Sidi's sons, Mahmoud and Mahdi, to go to the big Laylatul Qadr dhikr, which was happening at Sidi's house. And this has been something that's gone on for many, many years now. And Sidi always had a very big dhikr at his house. So we got over there, and of course they fed us. They had, there must have been maybe 100 to 200 people there. I don't know, a lot of people. They brought out, a lot of food, which is, traditional. We broke fast. We had all that food. And then they gathered us around in the Zawiya. The Zawiya is kind of a beautiful space, and I have some pictures of that, which unfortunately I can't show here yet, but I have some pictures of the Zawiya and some of the music that they played. Now, they then broke out the cymbals, the tambourines, they had drums. It was a very robust dhikr. I mean, it was very, very strong. And one of the great things of the dhikr was they had the muezzin, who is the one who calls the prayer at Al-Aqsa, which is the 3rd most holy place in the world for Sufis and for Muslims. And he was the muezzin who has been, apparently, his family has held that position for 400 years. And this guy had the most beautiful voice you've ever heard. And the chanting that he did was just absolutely stunning. So he was chanting, from all different sources. It was in Arabic, so I didn't understand, most of it. But he was chanting just the most beautiful chants. They were doing the cymbals. They were doing the music. It was very, very, very powerful. And of course, many people afterwards came to me and said that they could feel Sidi's spirit very strongly running around the circle in this in the dhikr. It was just like our dhikrs here in the U.S. It was so interesting to be in Jerusalem with a completely different group of several hundred people and to feel exactly the same dhikr that we do here in the U.S. It was like identical, but it had the drums and the cymbals. Mahdi afterwards, his son came to me, he said that it was the most powerful dhikr he'd ever experienced in Laylatul Qadr. And certainly Sidi's light integrated very strongly into everybody. So, you know, I think the point of that is that we're getting ready to move forward. You know, Sidi's here in spirit, but we're also all moving forward, you know, absorbing this light and carrying the new kind of vibration of this new year. And the strength that's coming in for everybody, I think, is actually pretty extraordinary. So, you know, just be open, be ready, receive, you know, accept whatever it is that Allah wishes to give you. Don't be afraid. You know, whatever Allah gives is what He gives. So accept what He gives you. If He wants to raise you up, I'm actually amazed. Many people are actually afraid to be raised up. Allah may be wanting to raise you. He may be wanting to give you a new station, a higher station, more responsibility, more possibility. So don't be afraid to be lifted up. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to lift you up and raise you up, this is a positive thing. So don't be afraid of that. Say yes to that. And of course, many times when that happens, you know, all of our unworthiness comes up and our insecurities come up. We get frightened by those things. But don't be afraid of those things. In other words, if Allah wishes to lift you, you have to accept it. Accept the lifting, but understand also that there's a great deal of purification that may be needed so that you can anchor in what He wishes to give you. So Allah will lift you, and that's usually followed by a state of intense purification. So you have to do that work, the places inside of yourself that may fight with the elevation that's been given to you. So, you know, those are part of the barakah, the blessings, the positives that Allah has given to many of you. But I really have that sense that many, many people are being lifted up right now. I see it with people I talk to, people who call me in my travels, that this is going on. It seems at a very global level. At the same time, you know, we're also seeing, you know, many passings, and we're seeing the loss. When I was in Jerusalem meeting, I met with a man who was part of the Jewish, what do they call it, Knesset, the Congress, but he also was working together with some of with the kindergarten, and it turned out that he was one of the close friends of was it Thich Nhat Hanh, I think it is, if I'm saying it right. The Buddhist, and apparently I didn't realize this, but he'd had a major stroke and now is basically unable to talk and almost unable to move. And so they're also, you know, looking at what happens, you know, preparing for his passing. So again, what's the point is that there seems to be a big transformative time going on, many people leaving, many people being lifted up, many new things happening, and that each person needs to step in to what Allah is giving you. And again, to remember to always be, you know, in the humility, and that, you know, remember what Abdul Qadir Jilani said. He said, I went to every door seeking God, and when I got to the door of humility and humiliation and lowliness, the door opened for the highest levels. So the point of it is, as you get lifted up, remember to be in the deep humility and keep your head low. And remember to always be at the feet serving people, and to always, you know, help to bring Allah's face present in the world. And know that you will be facing some very tricky tests out there. Some very, very interesting things are going on in the world right now. So as we bring through these teachings, these sort of monotheistic teachings on the oneness of God, there is some very strong counterparts that are struggling with these teachings, and we have to be strong as we hold on to those teachings. So this is where, that's kind of my segue into this book. Now, part of the teachings here are about, let's see here, if I start with the first one, it has to do with purity and purification. So let me get my glasses on here. I'm going to need them to see this so I can see. So so he talks a little bit, this is about the rosary or the nespaha or the beads. So Alawi was saying that, in Sufi traditions, we use those beads, right? Now, all of you have one. It's called the mespaha. And most people, Sidi told most people to wear those around the neck. So if you don't have one, the new people, you should get yourselves one. Usually you want to get a 100 beaded one, not the 108, but the 100 beaded one. And these represent the 99 names of God. And the 100th bead is the Aleph, which is it represents the name of God itself. Okay. And we're getting a little bit of feedback here. Let me show you. I have one sitting here. Let me get it for you real quick. And this is this is the traditional one that this was actually one that Sidi gave me many years ago, about 15 years ago. Which, here's your Aleph. This is your Aleph down here. And you notice you've got your 10 beads on here. And so every time you do 100, you pull off one of these come up. So you're actually, this is what you keep track of your 1,000. So you've got your beads. And Alawi was talking about this. He says that many people say this is an innovation of Sufis, which is a bad thing. In other words, they say that by using this, you're not supposed to use it. Many of the traditional Muslims will say, oh, you're not supposed to use this thing. But he actually defended the beads. And he gave a number of situations where he talked about the use of these beads and why we use them. And one of the things I want to bring about was about intentionality, because it says that Allah judges you by your intention. In other words, why do you do something? That's how God judges our journey as a human being. He looks to what we do and why we do it. So you might be doing a bad thing for a good reason. Allah will probably forgive it. On the other hand, if you're doing a good thing for a bad reason, it actually can go against you, you see? So you have to be very watchful about your intentionality. And Alawi was very, very much about intentionality. If you read his works, he talks about, always goes back to the intentionality of what we're doing. So what's the intentionality of these beads? Is it a worshiping? Are we worshiping the beads? Of course not. It's nothing more than to count and keep us on remembrance. It's to hold the remembrance so that we know that we do 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 of a particular dhikr. It's carried in these beads. So when you have beads, look at your intentionality to it, because many people will say, "Oh, you can't use this. This is an innovation, or it's something used by Buddhists, or something used by Christians, or something used by different people," and they complain about it. But in reality, it's nothing more than a way of counting. It's nothing more than a way of counting, and a way of keeping you on track with your dhikr. And the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, spoke about the remembrance. He said that the remembrance is the key to reaching the kingdom of God. In other words, for those of you who are seeking the kingdom of God, you wish to reach the kingdom of God, that the remembrance is one of the keys to reaching the kingdom of God. So what does that mean? It means that if you make the dhikr, Allah, 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 and you're using these beads, Allah, and you're going through these beads as you go, Allah, 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 that you are working yourself towards the kingdom of God. Now, in our terminology, the kingdom of God is the unity. Okay, so when we say that you've reached the kingdom of God, we mean that you entered the world of unity. So many people, they go to the church, or they go to the temple, they go to the synagogue, and they're trying to get to God. are trying to get something from God. And so their prayers are so God gives them something, or they're trying to reach something. Like, for example, in Jerusalem, my son Sam and I went to the tomb of David, which they call King David, and it's on the mountain of Zion. It's actually Mount Zion. So if you go in, there's this mountain, you climb up this small mountain, and it's called Mount Zion. And at the top of the mountain is a very, very beautiful temple. And in that temple is the tomb of Dawood. We say Dawood, or King David. Now, when I went in there were many people in that tomb, and they were all praying. I don't know if they were praying to David, they were praying to God, but they were also praying, many of the Jewish people that were there were praying for the return of the Jewish state. In other words, that the Jewish, I don't know if it's religion or culture or just its being as a movement became the primary movement again. That at the time of King David, they were the strongest in the world, and they were praying for that return of the king and the return of that power. And there was a great fervor going on around that tomb. There were maybe 30 people in that room, and they were all dancing and singing and shouting and screaming and praying and begging and asking God to grant the return of the king, the return of that king back again. So they're praying to God for something. But in Sufism, we're not so interested, in that type of prayer ourselves. We do pray to God and ask for things, of course, and it's not to judge that in any way. But for us, it's not about asking so much of God to give. It's about oneness with God. In other words, it's not about asking God to give anything. It's really about reaching to God to have oneness. Now, again, you can pray and ask God for whatever you need, and it's perfectly allowable to do that, and you should do it. But at the highest level, there should be this place of really, you're doing your beads to come into oneness with God. So this whole practice of dhikr with the mesbah is not really about asking for anything. You're not asking. You're simply remembering the name Allah so that you reach into that state of consciousness. And you're not afraid. In other words, you're not afraid to bow to God and allow Allah, subhanahu wa ta'ala, allow Allah to enter into your being and to do the purification work that's necessary for you. In other words, when you say Allah 100 times, you are absorbing a great deal of light from these beads. And it's not from the beads. A great deal of light from Allah is being absorbed, and you're calling forth it using the beads. Now, that light will go into the beads, of course, and that's a good thing because it does absorb in here. And when you keep them close, you do have it sort of like a warm blanket that's close to you. It's vibrating that positivity. But you want to go and you want to do your remembrance, and you want to be steadfast in that remembrance. You need to do it frequently until Allah gives you the downpouring of goodness and light that's going to change your reality. Okay? In other words, and this is where I think people stop, is they don't go all the way through. Okay? In other words, you have to go all the way through in the deepest way. In other words, to fully allow yourself to absorb everything until you change. Okay? So I'm going to just say that that's one of the keys to working with the beads or the mesbah is allowing yourself to go all the way through till you get it. Okay. So let me read to you a little bit about, again, I'm going to read to you some things from him. I want you just to kind of capture who he is. And he says, he talks about how excellent a rememberer is the one who uses the mesbah. Is this anything but a pious intention? What's the intention? Similarly, there are those who carry mesbahs by ways of imitating devout men, hoping to be eventually of their number. And is this not also a pious intention? Thus, there are few of those whom you describe as hypocrites, and they only remember God a little. You see? So again, the first thing I want you to feel this man's quality, which is just, he is al-wadud, he is love. Feel the love, feel the quality of love moving through him, and feel the gentleness in his nature. And take a moment and just kind of tune into that, everybody. Good. Okay, you have that quality. Did you touch his spirit? Could you feel how his spirit is so gentle and so beautiful and so in such a really high state of servitude and mercy and compassion in his being? Okay. He says, it is such verses as this last one which compel the Sufis to steep themselves in remembrance and to be quite open about it and to abound in it, so that they may pass out of the category of little into those of much, thus escaping altogether from the qualification of hypocrites, which is remembering God only a little. May God inspire both of us and you to remember him a lot and to think well of all of his saints. Okay, so again, notice what he's asking. He's saying, let's remember God a lot and not be of those who remember him a little, and to realize it's necessary to remember a lot. Then he goes on to say in a new chapter, another error that people complain against the Sufis is that they imitate people from other faiths. And he mentions this, he's critiquing somebody who critiqued him. He's saying, and there are certain innovations which are indeed to be avoided. But it was clear to me that you were just treading out the ground for an onslaught with all of your anger upon the tombs of the righteous and those who visit them. So again, this is another big thing. You see, one of the traditions that many people around the world do is they visit the tombs of saints. And the belief is there is some type of barakah or blessing that happens at those tombs. Now, there's been great criticism that this is a bad thing to do, that if you visit the tombs of a saint, you're worshiping the saint instead of God, and this is a very bad thing. But Sidi Alawi, he actually corrects that. He says this is not accurate. He's saying that he doesn't know of anyone who visits the tombs of a saint who's going to the saint instead of God, that they're going to the saint to try to receive an intermediary way of help of getting to God, because for some reason they are not capable of accessing God that strongly yet because of their own veiling. You see? So this is, again, he's correcting this type of criticism that occurs because he's trying to show people it's not about, it's like, what's the intentionality of the choices that you're making? Okay, now as you become new Sufis, your intentionality is to reach oneness with God. You're going to be trying to reach oneness with God, or Tawheed, or what we call the station of unity, or Haqiqah. That's your initial goal on this path, is to reach into those levels of consciousness. And you're going to be doing the purification work to reach there. What is the purification work that you have to do? Well, first of all, you have to do the purification work of your actions. In other words, that your actions are acceptable by Allah. That's the first step. Are your actions acceptable? The second step is your heart acceptable to God? Is your heart acceptable to God? And many people think, oh, if I do all my actions right, that that's enough. And this is absolutely absurdity. The actions are very important, but your actions are not what God looks to. God looks at your actions. More importantly, he looks to your heart. So it's not your actions per se, it's the intentionality of your heart. What is your heart doing? Why is your heart doing? What is your heart wanting? This is what Allah looks to you and yourself. And this is what we have to look in ourselves at. In other words, what is the intentionality? Why do we do things? Why does our hearts, are we meeting with people because we're afraid to be alone? Are we meeting with people because we want to worship God more deeply? Are we meeting with people because we want to control or dominate them? Why are we meeting with people, as an example? So Allah looks to your heart for the intentionality of your heart. Okay, and he's talking about this. People can go to tombs, people can carry beads, nesfaha, rosaries, whatever you want to call this, and say, oh, this is a bad thing. But in reality, there's no bad thing. There's only the use of a tool to help you to reach further. And then Alawi says further, he says, did you know that in the time of the Prophet, they used to use date stones to count? So every time they said Allah, they take a stone, a little date stone, a pit, and they moved the pit. And so they were counting with these pits. And now these pits evolved into these mesbahas. So now we're using these for counting. So he's saying, what's the intentionality? In other words, to notice your intentionality as you go. Okay. Now, he goes on to say, let's see here, as evidence of the profitlessness of visiting the dead, you quoted the words of Ibn Arabi. Ibn Arabi is one of the great Sufi saints. Verily, the dead man is of no avail, for to avail is to act, and his action has been suspended. So he's saying that the dead people can't do any action. Therefore, what's the value of visiting the tombs? Now, I do not say that there is any mistake in these words of his, but I do say that there is a mistake in your understanding of what he meant. The dead man is of no avail as regards the training of the disciple and his furtherance upon the path of God. This is true. It is scarcely possible to receive the benefit of guidance without the companionship of a living man. But as to the benefit which is sought when one takes as intermediaries and intercessors with God the elect or saints of his creatures, and when one seeks the blessings at their shrines, this the law gives us an option to acknowledge. For the lawgiver has, on the contrary, allowed us to seek grace through that which is altogether lifeless, such as the black stone in the holy house, let alone forbidden us to do. Why would he forbid us to do through undefiled spirits of the elect and the bodies which radiate pure light? So again, what I'm trying to say, if you listen closely, or maybe everybody just takes a moment to feel what he's saying here. Which is that it's okay in trying to reach the kingdom of God for you to use things that are not creating problems. So it's okay for you to use a mesbah to count the amount of times you say Allah. It's okay for you to seek the grace of the elect, the saints, such as somebody like Sidi, to help you, because the spirit of the elect can be an intermediary to help you come closer to God, not through guiding you and not through correcting you, but simply through supporting you and your spirit in relationship to the one, because they're closer to the one than we are. You see? So for that reason, the spirit of these people are valuable for you. So again, it's very important as Sufis that we look very deeply at what we do, remembering that it's not just black and white. In other words, did you get it, Abdullah? Okay. In other words, that we have to be of the most intelligent people. And when I say most intelligent, I mean, don't just stop with the actions. Don't stop with the actions, but understand the intentionality of what you are doing. And remember that the most important intentionality is the intentionality of your heart. In other words, what is your heart doing in a particular situation? And there was a story, I've told this before, but I love the story, where a man came to the Prophet, and the concept was that Allah is unconditionally merciful and compassionate, and that his compassion is the greatest thing that he carries. And the man came to the Prophet and said, "Oh Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, can you talk to me about how God handles one who kills somebody?" And the Prophet got very angry, and he said, "Allah does not accept killing, and he does not accept anybody being hurt, and that the one who kills another person without reason is doomed to an eternity in the hellfire." It was a very, very strong statement. And he was saying, you have no right to kill anybody. You have no right to hurt anybody. And if you do that, Allah may sentence you to the hellfire. The companions around the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, were very wonderment. Well, that was a very strong thing. And they wondered about it, but they didn't say anything. They just began to contemplate it. Then a week or two later, or sometime later, another man came over, and he asked exactly the same question. He said, "Oh Prophet," he said, "what does Allah do to people? What's the consequence for people that have killed somebody?" And he said, "Allah is the most compassionate, the most gentle, the most merciful of the merciful." He said that Allah has eternal forgiveness and eternal pardoning. And then if one if one kills someone, Allah will be of the most compassion and the merciful with that person. And the companions' mouths dropped open. They were like, what could this mean? Why is the Prophet giving such diametrically opposite advice to these two different people? You see? So very important for us as Sufis to understand intelligence. Intelligence means that we have to use our minds. We have to use our understanding. We have to be like the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, and understand the inner dimension of things. In other words, we could say, thou shalt not kill. That if you kill, you go into the fire. It's a great sin. End of story. But all of a sudden, you hear this Prophet talking about it in a very different way. You see, so what does that mean? How can we use our intelligence? Well, if we use our intelligence, we have to look at that. Well, wait a minute. It's not just black and white. There's gray zones. So there are black and white, and there's gray. When do we use black and white, and when do we use gray? That's the first question. Secondly, why? Why did he say those things? And what was the reason for this contradiction? And why is there contradiction? You see, this is why you have to be very intelligent. And this is from the Hadith. These were the recorded things that happened around the Prophet. He said, why did this occur? Well, Umar, who was one of the close companions, came to the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, and said, "Why, O Prophet, did you say these things? I can't understand the diametrically opposed statements you made." And the Prophet said, "Because through gnosis, through tajalli, through revelation, the first man that came to me, I saw when I looked into his heart." Now look at this. He's looking into his heart. He's able to see into the man's heart. What does that mean? He can see into the heart. It means he can see with images the desires that are in the man's heart. He could see the images inside the man's heart of his desires and what he was planning to do. And he said, when I looked into his heart, I saw that he was about to kill somebody. And because of that, to protect him, I gave him that statement so that he would not kill the person and he would not be punished for what he did. Okay, now look again. You see the beauty of the statement? That he's able to protect that person in that way. And then, of course, the second statement, he said, I looked into the heart of this man and I saw the images that he had killed someone and that he was in such a bad state about it that I gave him what he needed to protect him from himself so that he did not hurt himself, that he would not, maybe, who knows what, hurt himself in some bad way by the remorse that he felt for what he did. So I gave him hope and I gave him strength so that he could overcome what he had done. You see? So you understand now, this is how the Sufi works. When we speak about the prophets, when we speak about the Gnostics, when we speak about sheikhs of Sufism, when we speak about the elect, we're speaking about people with this type of intelligence, that they're using their intelligence in this way to what? To protect the people from what? From doing the things that would make God unhappy, that would make God unhappy with them in some way. And this is the role of the Sufi. Now, the last thing I'll read, because I know we're coming up to time here, assuming I haven't lost it because my thing just fell out here. Let's see if I still have it. Yes. I just wanted to give you, this is a little bit of a story about what happened after his sheikh died. And his sheikh left the world. And I want to read this to you because I found it very interesting. He said, after the sheikh, I have his name here, it was, let me see here, I think, no, I can't find it. But anyways, his sheikh died. And he said, when the Fuqara, meaning the students, had made up their minds with the circumstances all in their favor not to let me go away, they decided to have a general meeting in our master's Zawiya, spiritual retreat. And they took the oath of allegiance to me by word of mouth, and it continued to be taken in this way by the older Fuqara, whereas all the subsequent newcomers took it through the clasping of hands. As to the members of the order who were outside of the Zawiya, I did not write to any of them, nor did I put them under any obligation. But it was not long before groups of them started coming to me of their own with the will to acknowledge me, testifying as their own convictions and telling what they had heard about me from our master of what had come to them by way of intuition or inspiration. So it went on until all the members of the order were unified except 2 or 3. This union of the Fuqara was counted by us as a miraculous grace from God, for I had no outward means of bringing within my scope individuals from so many different places. It was their unallied certainty, nothing else, as to how I had stood with our master in this respect. Moreover, the training that they had from him was firmly engrafted in them as regards to recognizing the truth and acknowledging it wherever it might be. For he had gone on giving them the means of doing this until, thank God, it had become second nature to them. And this is where I find it very interesting now, this last little paragraph here. He says, I received their oaths of allegiance, and I gave them advice, and I spent on those who visited me at the time part of what I had in hand on my journey. And I took nothing from them, for I never felt easy about taking things from people. As a result of all this, I was left in a quandary, not knowing what to do or where the will of God lay. Now listen to this. This is one of the pegs. You have to understand, this is a peg. This is a man who's reached, he's going to be replacing the Gauth, the pole, the Kutub of his time. He's at the point of replacement. And he says, at this moment in time, I'm in a quandary because I don't know what to do or where the will of God lay. And I found that fascinating, that even, as he's stepping into this next level, he doesn't know. He's not clear. There's a lack of certainty happening here. This is very valuable for all of us, because as we're moving forward, if the Kutub, the new coming in Kutub, is uncertain, everyone is going to have uncertainty. He goes on to say, ought I go away according to what I felt to be an imperative need, or ought I give up all idea of going away and devote myself to acting as the rememberer to the Tarika, to the Fukara, according to what seemed to be already my fate? I was still hesitating when the time came at which time God had ordained that I should visit the seal of the Calphinate. One day he put into my soul a feeling of constriction, which was so persistent that I began to look about for a means of relief. Now again, this is the second thing I wanted to say. Listen to this. Here is a man that is about to become the new pole, and Allah puts the Jalal, this powerful constriction inside his soul, which makes him so incredibly uncomfortable. He said, it was so persistent that I began to look about for some means of relief, and it occurred to me to visit some of the Fuqara outside of the town. So I took with me some of the disciples who were staying with us, Sheikh Muhammad ibn Batsi, and off we went with God's blessing. When we had reached our destination, it occurred to us that we might as well visit some of the tombs of those people. Some of the Fuqara of those people, some of the disciples, which we did. And after we had stayed with them for about 2 days, my companion said to me, if only we could go on to Algeria, for I have friends there, and there we could go to publish the book, which became this book. Okay, so the point of all this is that what I'm trying to say as a final piece of understanding is that even as we make change and as we're moving forward on our process, and as you're stepping into these new levels, which I believe are opening this year for many people, that you may have moments when you're not sure what the will of God is. You may have doubt as to your direction. You may be confused about what to do. You may have contradicting forces going on inside yourself, from the people, from your own self, from others. And you may be struggling. And it's important to remember that even at the highest levels, they are also struggling at times with these things as well. So that we need to be very patient, very kind with ourselves, to know that the forces of people can be very strong, can be very unconscious at times, and to allow ourselves to really seek what it is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is seeking for us to know, to not be afraid to go into retreat and take the time to work out what Allah wishes you to know or to choose. These choices are not always easy, and the guidance may not be clear. So it's very important to get up in the night with your mesbah, with your beads, and to remember the name of Allah until the guidance becomes certain and the clarity becomes certain. And if you need help because you're having trouble reaching to Allah for some reason, maybe because you're veiled, maybe because you're, who knows, there's many reasons why. You can ask your sheikh, your Sufi sheikh, to help you. You can ask Sidi Spirit to help you. You can ask. You're not to worship anyone but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But you can ask for help, not to be afraid to ask for help. And don't be afraid to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for help as well. I know people who they spend hours in a remembrance and asking Allah for help, and you know what? Allah gives it to them. And I know others that say, well, I shouldn't really be asking Allah anything, and they don't even do the remembrance because they're afraid of asking. This is also not right. Do your remembrance, Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for what you need as deeply as possible. Seek, if you need an intermediary to help, it's okay to seek the help when you need it. There's nothing wrong with getting help when you need it. And remember, the help that you're getting is intercession with God, where God may change the creation for you. He might ease your way. He might make it more gentle for you. Or Allah will give you the guidance that you need to correct whatever situation is going on in your life. And this is also perfectly allowed. So this is my hope for everyone. I know we're just about at time here, but to take your time and to seek in remembrance. Don't listen to other people. If they don't like what you're doing, this is from themselves. Follow the intentionality of your deep heart. And if your heart is doing the right thing, I'm sure Allah will not do anything but support you and lift you up. And it's okay to seek the help of the spirits when you need them. And it's also okay to seek the help of those people who are embodied who can help you as well if you need help. So thank you all very much. And that's probably all I need to say, unless you have any more, Abdullah, that you'd like to add.